Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture on Introduction to Trees. So in this lecture, we'll be going over what this section is about, and then we'll get a brief introduction to the data structure that is called a tree. So in this section, the tree section, we learn about tree data structures. We're going to implement trees with lists, and we're also going to implement trees using object-oriented programming, so classes. And then we're also going to implement a priority queue data structure, and then we're going to have some interview problems. There's going to be a lot going on in this section, but what I want you to know is this section only covers basics of trees and what's known as an abstract data type, or ADT. This topic in general is pretty vast, and it could easily warrant its own course, so just keep this in mind, but throughout the lectures you'll get additional resources to check out in case you want to dive deeper into trees. So let's just talk about trees in general. The tree data structure has a root, branches, and leaves. So just like a tree in nature, you have a similar structure. The difference between a tree in nature and a tree in computer science, though, is that a tree data structure has its root at the top and its leaves at the bottom, so it branches downwards. So you've maybe have already seen these kind of tree data structures, so let's just look at a few common examples. Here we can see a tree as a classification tree from biology. So we have biological classification of some animals. So this is a pretty simple example, but we can learn about the properties of trees. So this example demonstrates that trees have a hierarchy, and they're structured in layers where more general things are near the top and more specific things are near the bottom. So here we have a hierarchy that's the kingdom, the phylum, the class, etc. So no matter how deep we go into the classification tree, we get all the organisms are still animals. So that's important to note here. Another second property of trees is that all of the children of one node are independent of the children of another node. And a third property is that each leaf node is unique. And we'll go more into what nodes are and what leaves are and what children are in the vocabulary section of this lecture. So another example of a tree structure that you probably use every day is a file system. So in a file system, directories or folders are structured as a tree. So here we can see an example of this, where you basically have just a small part of a Unix file system as a hierarchy. And just like that biological classification tree, you can follow a path from the root to any directory. And that path will uniquely identify that subdirectory, so all the files in it. And another important property of trees, also derived from that hierarchy, is that you can move entire sections of a tree called subtrees, so there's a subtree here, to a different position in the tree without affecting the lower levels of the hierarchy. So for example, in this particular picture, you could take the entire subtree starting with etc., this etc slash, and you could reattach it to under user here, USR. And importance to note that it's not going to affect any of the children that are at the same level of this tree. Okay, so one final example is a web page. So if you're familiar with HTML, it also has a similar structure where the tree that corresponds to the HTML tags, you can use that to create a page. Okay, so I've mentioned some terms such as nodes, children, parents. What we're going to do now is go over some common vocabulary terms that you should know when discussing trees. So a node is a fundamental part of a tree. It can have a name, and you can also call that the key. So a node may also have additional information, and you can call that additional information the payload. So while the payload information isn't actually central to a lot of the tree algorithms we're going to be learning about, it's often critical in applications that make use of trees. Next term we're going to learn about is edge. So an edge, again, another fundamental part of a tree. It's an edge connects two nodes that show that there's a relationship between them. And then every node, except for that root node, is connected by exactly one incoming edge from another node. And each node may have several outgoing edges. So to show you what I mean by this, we're going to learn about one more, the root. So the root of the tree is the only node in the tree that has no incoming edges. So here we have kind of an illustration of a tree. It looks a little different because the children of the nodes are linked and attached to it, but that's just to show the hierarchy levels. So here we can see, here we can see there's a root node for you with 2 children, and each child has only one edge coming out of it, and it goes to the next level of nodes. And notice that the root node is the only node here that has no incoming edges. And then we can see children and then other nodes. So a path is an ordered list of nodes that are connected by edges. So if you look, for example, back to the biology tree that we were looking at, mammal to carnivores to other Felidae, Felis is a path there. So as you continue on and have an ordered list of nodes that are connected by edges, you have a path. And then children, formally, are a set of nodes, we'll call them C here, that have incoming edges from the same node too, and are said to be the children of that node. So for example, we can see here that the root node has 2 children, and then each of those childs goes to another node. Node 1 has 3 children, node 2 only has 1 child. And then we have parents. So a node is the parent of all the nodes it connects to with outgoing edges. So here you can see that child 1 is the parent of node 1. Sibling nodes in a tree are the children of the same parent are said to be siblings. So here child 1, child 2, and child 3 are all siblings of node 1. And then a subtree is a set of nodes and edges comprised of a parent and all the descendants of that parent. So you could loop around some subtrees here versus the entire tree. And then lastly, a leaf node is a node that has no children. So node 3, 4, 5, and 6 don't have any children, so they're leaf nodes, just like the leaf on a tree that doesn't have a branch extending out of it. Now what we're going to learn about is levels, not particular nodes. So the level of a node n is the number of edges on the path from the root node to n. So if we're looking at node 2 here, or node 1, they are both at level 1, since it only takes one path to get back to the root node. And then the height of a tree is equal to the maximum level of any node in the tree. So we've described all the parts of a tree, and now we're going to bring them together to form a full formal definition. And something to note here is the image I've been showing you about a root node of a tree goes along with this particular definition. So a tree consists of a set of nodes and a set of edges that connect pairs of nodes. So a tree has the following properties. One node of the tree is designated as the root node. So that was that top node in the picture, which if you go to the next slide, here it is. So every node n, except the root node, is connected by an edge from exactly one other node, p, where p is the parent of n. A unique path traverses from the root node to each node, and if each node in the tree has a maximum of 2 children, we say that that tree is a binary tree. And we'll learn more specifically about binary trees and binary search trees later on in this section of the course. So this figure illustrates that definition of the tree. The arrowheads on the edges indicate the direction of the connection. There's also a recursive definition of a tree. So you could say a tree is either empty or consists of a root and 0 or more subtrees, each of which is also a tree. So the root of each subtree is connected to the root of the parent tree by an edge. So to show you what I mean by that, here's kind of a simpler figure, and this is the recursive definition. So you have roots, and then you have subtrees. And as I mentioned, a tree is either empty or consists of a root and 0 or more subtrees. So if you remember back to the recursion section of the course, I mentioned that recursion can be used to define trees and define tree traversal algorithms. So it's important to also understand this particular definition. So here we know that in this figure, the tree has at least 4 nodes, since each of these triangles representing a subtree must have a root. So you have the root node, and then 3 subtrees, and we know each of these 3 subtrees also has a root, since we're dealing with the recursive definition right now. So we know we have at least 4 nodes. It may have many more nodes than that, but we don't know until we look deeper into the tree, which basically means making another recursive call. Okay, So let's just go over a review of everything we learned. We got a brief overview of what to expect for this section of the course. We went over some of the basics of trees and real-life examples. We also learned about vocabulary for trees and definitions for trees. And now we're ready to learn more about trees and learn about them to prepare for interview problems. All right, thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.